So, of course, I want to start by saying thank you, everyone, for joining. My name is Cody Armstrong, and today, as you can see from the slide, we're discussing what's new in Onshape. And we're going to focus on the last month or so of updates. So, what happened in the month of August with regards to Onshape? We're going to discuss all the new features in as much detail as we can. Now, one of the biggest benefits to attending one of these webinars is the opportunity to ask any questions that you'd like. So, there's a questions dialog there, and you go to Webinar Control Panel. Feel free to ask any question that you'd like. If you are having any other sound issues, any troubles hearing me, let me know. Otherwise, we'll move forward. So again, what's new in Onshape? We're going to focus on just the improvements added in the month of August. Now, there are always a few things that I'd like to mention about Onshape in general before we get into the topic of the day. And one of the first things I'd like to mention is our mission statement, our goal with Onshape, and that is getting everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. So if you haven't downloaded Onshape Mobile for Android or iOS, if you haven't tried Onshape on another computer, just realize that you have accessibility to that CAD data anywhere you are. So if it's your Android phone, your iPhone, your iPad, your Android tablet, Windows, Mac, Linux, Chromebooks, it really doesn't matter. You have accessibility from any device, anywhere. The other element of that is working collaboratively, working together. And a big part of the improvements in the August update is that story of working together and how we handle that in Onshape. So again, everyone working together with CAD on any device, anywhere. That's our goal. Now, the next thing I always like to mention is, of course, Onshape itself is professional 3D CAD. We have parts, assemblies, and drawings, and that's typically what people associate with professional 3D CAD, parts, assemblies, and drawings. But we have a lot of things that you don't get in other professional 3D CAD systems, stuff that really makes us unique. And one of the first things I'd like to mention is just our frequent updates, very much what we're talking about here today. Roughly every 3 weeks, Onshape releases new features. So you have new features being added to the product roughly every 3 weeks, and you don't have to do anything. There's no downloads, no installs. You simply log in, and new features are there. So frequent updates is one of the very important parts of Onshape's mission, the ability to have everyone using Onshape on the same version and never have any kind of version discrepancy and never any headaches with regards to updates. So frequent updates and totally transparent to the end user. All you need to do is log in. The other thing I always like to mention is in other CAD systems, you have what's often referred to as a PDM system, a data management system, really a software meant to manage all the files that you create in a CAD software. That concept isn't necessary in Onshape. We have the ability to control versions, to see the history going all the way back to the moment it's created, to control the permissions of the document, all the same things you would typically do in one of those types of systems. So built-in version control, unlimited history, unlimited undo capabilities, these are things that are generally reserved for very expensive, very complex PDM systems. So built-in version control. The other thing I always like to mention is if you're coming from another CAD system or maybe you have CAD data in another CAD system, we can import and export a lot of different formats. So if you're working with step files or IGES files or Parasolid files or DXFs or STLs, we can import and work with that data. We can also export to a lot of these formats as well. So just realize that Onshape works well alongside other CAD applications. We can work with a lot of that data that you've built up over the years. And we can also work with vendors and things like that when it comes to exporting to different formats. So one more thing that I want to mention here, new methods of collaboration. With Onshape, you can share your document with others and work together in real time. And that's something that's never been done in professional 3D CAD before. You've never been able to open a document and watch it live update as people make changes. And that's something that you can do in Onshape that you simply can't do in any other system. And it takes an architectural shift, building the CAD system in a different way from scratch to accomplish that. And that's why you haven't seen it in any of the competition. So entirely new methods of collaboration. You get real-time update capabilities. There's never a discrepancy of, is this the latest version of the file? We never have that concept. Now, it's not just real-time collaboration. That's a big benefit, but It's also things like comment capabilities, which we're going to discuss here today, real-time chat integrated into the document. We also have things like follow mode that allow you to see each other's screens. So we've really tried to build in the collaborative experience into Onshape itself and not a separate solution or software that you have to install separately or manage separately. It's a core part of Onshape. Now, the last thing I want to mention is customization with FeatureScript. This is something that, again, is very unique to Onshape. It's a programming language that allows you to build your own CAD feature. So if you're all interested in A, programming, and B, CAD features, and maybe building your own custom CAD feature, definitely check out FeatureScript. The biggest things I always like to mention is it just has the potential to save you tons of time and give you consistent results without a lot of headache. And especially for more complex modeling operations where it's several steps and you find yourself doing it often, FeatureScript could help you a lot. So definitely, if you're interested in all in programming and at all in writing CAD features, check out FeatureScript. All right, so enough on the general Onshape knowledge. Let's get into the update process. Now, I've already briefly discussed this, but Onshape itself is updated roughly every 3 weeks, and that's what we're talking about here today. So the updates are automatic. They're transparent to the end user. You shouldn't be, aware of the updates rather than, of course, opposed to attending one of our webinars, but really it shouldn't be something that you have to deal with. It's not a headache that you have to manage yourself. It's something that happens in the background. So the updates are automatic, roughly every 3 weeks. Onshape itself is updated. All your data is updated. And it means that everyone using Onshape is always on the same version. And because we manage that, it just simplifies the process of CAD in general. Now, the important thing, the thing we're here to discuss today, is these updates include new functionality. So there is many, many bug fixes going on in the background, and that's worth mentioning as well. So roughly every 3 weeks, we push updates. In fact, we push updates even between those periods for bug fixes. But just realize that these updates aren't simply bug fixes or patches to things. They include new features, new functionality, and that's of course what we're here to talk about today. So let's dig into it. Now, over the past, I would say 9 months now, we've really added a lot. And if you go back and look at the last 9 months, in particular the first 6 months of the year, there's been a lot of new features added. I always like to show this slide just to show you this is just the first 6 months of the year. And you can see, a ton of important features. And, these are not trivial things. For instance, in February, sheet metal is one of the items in that list, right? So these are big new features that are being added, and they're being added at a very fast rate. Now, some highlights that I always like to point out. So if you're just getting started with Onshape, or maybe you've looked at Onshape in the past, but you haven't really dug into the new features in the last 9 months or so, here are things I always like to mention. In the last 9 months, we've released simultaneous sheet metal, managed in context design, right, in context at the assembly level, a lot of different curve features, projected curve, bridging curves, and so on, more surfacing tools, lots of more surfacing tools, but not only built into our existing commands, new features in our existing commands, but entirely new surface commands like fill, for example. So many different surfacing tools, custom properties for that metadata management at the company level, and a lot more. As you saw from the last slide, a lot of new features. These are always, just things I like to mention to anybody that hasn't seen Onshape in a while. Realize now we have sheet metal, we have in-context assembly, we have complex curve and surface creation, right? And that's all been released in the last 9 months or so. All right, so what about today? We're going to focus on primarily the August update. So we're going to stick with just what happened in the last month or so. Now, if you're interested, we have a blog post we push out roughly every 3 weeks along with the update to discuss all the new features. We do these webinars once a month to discuss the past month and the updates in it. Now, in August, we had one update. August 16th, we pushed an update, and it had a number of new features that many of which were user requested. Now, this is a short webinar. We're going to get through this one update pretty quickly. So again, I encourage you to ask any questions that you'd like in the questions dialog there in the GoToWebinar control panel. All right, so let's dig into it. Now, as I mentioned, August 16th, we had an update. And I would say probably the biggest improvement is the real-time chat capabilities. And Onshape has always had a comments function. If you're not familiar with it, there's a comments icon in the top right corner of your Onshape interface. And if you click that, you can add comments to the document. And the main use case there is, I have multiple people in the document, and I want to communicate with them. A lot of times we see engineers like grabbing screenshots and sending emails back and forth with marked up screenshots. And the idea was to try and build that into the document. And that's where comments came from. And comments were just a simple way of adding some simple text, maybe tagging a feature or even a person and saying, hey, can you take a look at this boss or this fillet and tell me what you think? And you can do all that. You can tag features, you can tag people in comments. So it's a very useful way of communicating within the document. But it's never really been considered a real-time chat tool. And really the difference is, the notifications of how you're notified, how the software lets you know that someone has added a comment. In the past, it was a very small visual cue, right? So in the top right corner, when someone added a comment, you'd see a very small indicator that a new comment was created. What's changed with this update is for the very first comment in your session, when you're on session, when you log in, it's going to fly out automatically for that first comment only. And that's something I want to stress. You will see that comment fly out the first time anyone adds a comment for your session. So when you log in, that's defined as your session. If you log back out, log back in, that would be a new session. But the big thing I want to stress is you're not going to get a lot of flying out. It's not going to fly out for every new comment, but it will for that first one. And the idea behind that is just to give you that visibility that, hey, something has been added to the comments. So it's more of a real-time chat function. The moment comment is created, you're going to see that fly out. The moment that new comments are added, you're going to see them instantly update in the comments dialog. So just realize the comments, while they've always been robust, I've always been able to tag features and other people in the document with a comment. Now it behaves much more like a real-time chat tool. And that's because of the flyout functionality, the fact that it's much more in your face for that first comment. Now, again, I want to stress, if all of a sudden everyone starts adding a lot of comments, you're not going to get a lot of flyouts. It's only going to happen that one time. And that's just meant to notify you, but not become obtrusive, right? Not to get in the way. So that's the improvements to real-time chat. I don't have a specific example to show you. Just realize if you're in the document and it's shared in and someone else adds a comment and you're in that same document, you're going to get a little flyout with the comment. And it's just meant to, kind of give you that real-time chat function where, if someone adds comments, I instantly see them update. I can reply to them real time. And again, with all of comments in Onshape, you can tag features, you can tag faces. I can right-click a sketch and have someone look at that by tagging it. So definitely just one more layer on our comments functionality. Now, the next thing I want to mention is sheet metal flange improvements. Now, this one's a relatively simple one, but it was highly requested. So if you do any kind of sheet metal design and you do flange design, with it, we had the ability to create a flange, but the ability to define the bend angle was somewhat limited. And what I mean by that is you could define a bend angle for your flange, and you can enter in a value, but you couldn't really reference anything else in the model. You had to type in a static value, which of course isn't necessarily the best solution when we talk about design intent, right? If I want the flange to be parallel with other faces on my model, then punching in a value isn't a great solution, right? Because if I change the angle of the face that I want to reference, it doesn't update, and I have all these issues. Same issues I get when I add a dimension rather than a constraint, right? I don't create that relationship. So now what we get in the improvements in this update is in the actual flange command, you can reference other geometry. And the beauty there is you build that design intent into the sheet metal model. So this is a real simple one that I'll show you quickly here just to give you an idea. So the flange, you create a simple flange, right? And I select an edge just as I've always done. So this isn't new. And by default, it's going to create a bend angle of 90 degrees. You can see here. So that's the bend for the flange. Now what's new is the options to align to other things. So in this dropdown, you're going to see options to align to geometry, align from direction. And I can say align to geometry and select, for instance, a face of my model. And it will align the flange to that face. right? Parallel with the face. So if you have a scenario where you want the flange parallel to a face, definitely use this align to geometry. Now, it could be a face, it could be also an edge, for example. So I'm using a face in this example, but realize it's pretty flexible in what you're allowed to select as a reference. Now, you can also angle from a direction. So you can choose angle from direction and specify a direction, and then specify an angle relative to that direction. Right. So this is a scenario where I still want to reference geometry on my model, but I want to say, 5 degrees off from this edge of my model, right? Or 10 degrees off, or I input a value relative to that, not just simply aligning to it. So that's the difference between the two. You have align to geometry, angle from direction. Both allow you to reference edges or faces from the model as your direction or the bend angle for your flange. Right. And again, the idea there is in the past you had bend angle, but if I wanted to align this flange with this face, I just had to figure out what the angle was and then punch in that value. And it was very much trial and error. And of course, if I changed this angle at some point in the future, I'd have to come back and do that all over again, figure out what that angle is. So building a bit of design intent into some of the sheet metal features, you now have the option to align your flanges with geometry of your model, and offset from it, I should say, with the angle from direction. All right, so that's the big improvement. Again, in that drop-down menu of the flange command, you're going to see those options. Let's move on. So the next thing that I wanted to discuss here is merge scope with surface modeling. So in the past, when you created a surface feature, fill, loft, it doesn't really matter, any of those surface features, you had the ability to merge. There's an option in each of these commands for add. So when you did a fill, when you did the loft, and you were lofting surfaces, if you joined surfaces together, you could choose the option to add. It would merge everything into one surface. And very common in the surfacing world. If you're familiar with other CAD applications, commands like knit are very similar, right? Where you're merging multiple surfaces together. Well, this was built into Onshape as a default feature in all the surface commands. So the loft command, the extrude command, revolve, sweep. If you did a surface, you had the option to add that surface to other surfaces as long as they were sharing an edge. What's big with this update is now you can choose which surface that you want to merge with. And the big thing is that in the past, you had to merge with everything. So if I created a feature that overlapped with another surface, and maybe I wasn't ready to merge with everything just yet, I just wanted to merge with one other surface, you couldn't do that. That was a limitation in the past. Now in the surface modeling commands, anytime you choose surface in any of the commands, you're going to have an option to choose the merge scope. And this is really just bringing it in line with the solid modeling commands. The solid modeling commands have had this ability for a long time where you can go in and say, I want to merge this feature with this part, but not these other parts, especially important in multi-part modeling. So now you have the option to choose merge scope. What is it that you want to merge this feature with? Now, this is going to behave just like solid modeling, so really you shouldn't notice much of a difference. It's going to behave just like what you're used to. The big thing I would stress is anytime you choose this add option, whether you're in the fill command or the loft command or really any command that supports it, you have the option, of course, to create your surface. And in the surface option, you have this option to add. That's what merges the surfaces. What's new is the option to merge with all and the ability to uncheck that. Right? Because then I can go in and say, no, I want to merge only with this surface, right? So important to keep in mind, by default, it will merge with all, which is exactly what it did in the past. This was your only option in the past, and it was always on. Now you can uncheck that and say, no, I only want to merge this feature with this surface and not everything. Right. This is especially important when we start getting to more complex surface modeling, more multi-part surface modeling, where you may not necessarily be ready to merge with everything, but you do want to merge with something around it. Right. And that's where it's important. So just keep in mind, anytime you choose any command, that supports a surface and this option to add, you're going to have this checkbox merge with all. And by default, it will merge with everything, so it will behave the same way it always has by default. but now you can uncheck it and say, no, I want to merge with this one surface rather than everything. So that's the new option with regards to merging surfaces. It just gives you a little bit more control, and it's very important to start getting into more complex surface models that may involve multiple parts, even parts there for construction that you don't want to merge with, and scenarios like that. So just keep in mind, and it doesn't matter whether it's loft, it's fill, all those commands, you'll now have this option, this checkbox merge with all, and if you uncheck it, you can specify what you want to merge with. All right, moving on. So that is the improvements to merge scope and the ability to define a merge scope when we merge surfaces together. The next few improvements that I want to get into are drawing specific. And if you've watched over the past, 6, 8, 9 months, we've really put a priority on drawing improvements. So every update, you're seeing a lot of drawing improvements. And this was definitely no exception to that. I would say probably one of the biggest improvements, at least in my personal opinion, is just the ability to copy annotations between drawings. And this is something that a lot of users requested because a lot of times I have a standard note. I have a standard, thing on our drawings that we do in a number of different places. Maybe not in all drawings, but we do it a lot. So much so that, it doesn't really apply putting in the template, but we need a fast way to input that. And you can now take a note and copy it to other drawings. And it could be other sheets in the same drawing. It could be other drawings in the same document, right? So just keep in mind, you can right-click a note, choose the option to copy, go to a different sheet, go to a different drawing, and choose the option to paste. And that's something a lot of users requested. It's just an important workflow, especially for those common notes. You don't have to recreate them in every sheet or every drawing. So that's a big one. Copy annotations between drawings is definitely a big one. Another one is, especially if you use a lot of datums, very important. And that is the ability to drag the datum beyond the edge that you've referenced for it. So when you create a datum, you attach it to an edge of your model. Now you can grab that datum and drag it up and away from the geometry so that it's not in the way. Right. And that was the common complaint. You were limited in how much you could move that datum in the past. Now you can grab it, drag it. It will automatically create that extension line that you would need in order to move beyond the geometry. Right. So datum extension lines, there's lots of little improvements in drawings as well. Another example, another one that I think is really important is the version drawing thumbnails. A thumbnail is generated for each part, assembly, and drawing, so you can look at all of those specific to a version. So definitely little things like that. This is, almost behind the scenes, so to speak, that, in the background, we're capturing those thumbnails as you create versions now. So that's another example of an improvement. Okay, so let's get into a few of these. Again, feel free to ask any questions that you'd like in the questions dialog there in the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll do my best to address them. And what I'd like to do is start with the datum symbol extensions. And the big thing is the major difference here is as you create a datum symbol and you attach it to your geometry like so, here I've created my datum, I attached it to my model edge. You were limited in how much you can move this, where you can move this to. Now I can grab this and drag it up and past the geometry, and you can see it creates that extension line automatically for me. So again, a small thing, but very usable, very important if you use the datum feature often, right? If that's a critical thing for you, moving that datum away from potentially other dimensions and kind of decluttering the view, so to speak, is very important. And moving that datum is an important aspect of that. So just keep in mind, you can grab that datum, drag it up. You just got to grab the handle point here at the base of the datum and left click, drag it and move it. And if you move beyond the edge of the part like I did there, it will automatically add that extension line as it should. So that's one big improvement. If you use datums a lot, that's going to be an important one for you. Again, just getting it away from the model so that you can have dimensions and other things where you want them. So that is the improvements to datums. The next thing I want to mention, this is probably, at least in my opinion, one of the bigger improvements, is just the ability to copy annotations between drawings. And that's, again, a scenario where I have this common note or this common thing that I put in a lot of my drawings. Well, if I create it once, I can easily right-click copy, go to different sheets, and just right-click paste and position it, right? It's very easy. I'm not recreating, I'm not typing the same text over and over and over again. Rather straightforward example of this here, for instance, I have a comment that just says deburred before using it, right? You could have a comment saying it needs to be anodized. You can have, all kinds of different examples of just miscellaneous comments that I've seen dropped into a drawing. And what I often find is these notes are shared in a lot of different drawings. And what you would want to do, rather than creating a new note every time, is to right-click, copy the note, and then go to other sheets or other drawings, as I mentioned, and right-click and paste the note. Right, so you can right-click paste, and it'll paste the note into place, and there we go in the new sheet. Right, so deburr before use, rather simple note, but you get the idea. If you're spending this time creating this note that matches your company's spec, you don't want to do it over and over again. So right-click copy, right-click paste. You can go to different sheets, and you can go to even different drawings within the same document and do this. So just keep in mind, copy and paste notes definitely saves you a lot of time, especially for those notes that are shared amongst a lot of different drawings, right? The common notes. All right, so that is copy and paste annotations. That's really the last big thing that I wanted to mention here today. There's lots of little things that I would mention. For instance, you can double click a view scale label and now get to the view properties. That's another small improvement that we've made. If you right click a view scale label or a note, you'll see the option to edit. Right? So just keep in mind, little UI changes have happened, of course, as they do in all the updates. But I think the big things that I would stress, again, the ability to communicate in real time. You're going to get a little notification. The flyout window is going to pop out, much like it does in a real-time chat application. And you're going to see those comments for that first time automatically. It's going to pop out for you. So just realize real-time chat functionality, the ability for things to update in real time in the comments dialog, adds just one more layer to the collaborative experience and the comment functionality in general. So real-time chat, definitely a big improvement with this update. Sheet metal flange improvements that I mentioned earlier, just the ability to reference edges or faces of the existing model as your angle for your flange definition is a big thing, right? It allows you to build more design intent into the model, right? So that I'm not doing as much manual editing of dimensions and trial and error, trying to figure out angle values and so on. So again, sheet metal flange improvements, just the ability to define that bend angle by something other than a static value, right? The ability to reference an edge or a face and tell it that's the angle that I want. Now, the other big improvement, especially important if you're doing surface modeling, is just the ability to define a merge scope. So if you're doing more complex surface modeling, you can now specify, I want to merge with this surface, but not all surfaces. And that was a limitation in the past. Essentially, we had a merge with all as a default function, and you couldn't specify what you want to merge with. So now, again, merge scope is definable even in surface features. Right, and that was the key limitation. Now, again, to reiterate just on the concept of merge scope, if you've come from like a SolidWorks or other applications, it's very similar to knit. It allows you to merge multiple surfaces together, except it's built into all of our commands, right? It's built into loft, it's built into fill. It's an option within those rather than being a separate command. And now, with this latest improvement, you can define how you want it to knit, what you want to knit with or merge with. Now, the other improvements that I mentioned are largely drawings. Datum extension lines, that was another important one. That's a drawing level improvement. Copying annotations between drawings, at least in my opinion, probably the biggest drawings improvement. Also, little things like the ability to double-click a view scale label and bring up the properties for that view. The ability to get to image files and drawings by just right-clicking them. Right, so if you've imported a company logo and you want to quickly get to that logo, you can just right-click it. So lots of little things in the drawings UI, the drawings experience that's been improved. But I think the big things we've discussed here today. Now, as I mentioned before, we update often, and if you look at the date of this update and do the math, we're pretty close to another update. So just keep in mind, we're constantly improving, constantly evolving, and it is very much based on user feedback. So please keep that user feedback coming. Please let us know what is priorities to you, because that very much gauges what the next 3 weeks will look like, right? We're constantly changing priorities based on your feedback. So again, really encourage you to give us any feedback using that feedback tool under the help menu. We will be listening very closely. So that's what I had planned for you. I am going to stick around and answer any questions that you have. So make sure to ask them in the questions dialog in the GoToWebinar control panel. I'll stick around for a few minutes and make sure to get to all of them. But that's it, everyone. Thank you and have a good day.